Sis, have you gone from pet to threat at work? Know your legal rights. We have a labor and employment attorney with us today. So excited. A Black woman, labor and employment attorney. What a rare gift that we have today. So let me just lay out the format for today, just so I'm clear. So the first 30 minutes of our conversation is going to be open to everyone on YouTube. Okay. Hopefully it's Black women who are in toxic jobs. So that's going to be open for all of us. The next hour will be open only for YouTube members. So there's a separate link that if you're a member, you will receive that link where you can ask the attorney more personal questions that you may not want to ask on YouTube. And it's going to go way deep in the Q&A. So if you are a member, you will have access to that information, the link. If you want to become a member, you're like, what? How do I get access to this? You could easily become a member as easy as clicking the link for the join. There's a join button. Also in my description section, there is a link to join. Now, just a few. I'm going to be really brief, okay? Because of the brevity of this conversation and because of some feedback I've been receiving, I will really be limiting the amount of information I'm sharing about my own experiences. I'll share that during a Q&A because we have more time. But during this video, not going to really do that. And I normally go live in the evening, okay? Today, we're live in the daytime. You will see sometimes I have flexibility with scheduling. Usually it's in the evening. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to my Spelman sister, Whitney Rayleigh, to introduce herself, and we're going to get right into it. So Whitney, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure, absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name is Whitney Rayleigh. I am a labor and employment attorney. I represent employees all across the nation, federal employees. I also represent private employees who are located in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. The issues or claims that I represent individuals in can be anything from removal from federal employment or some kind of other adverse action. And then your typical civil rights cases of discrimination, retaliation type of claims.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Welcome, Whitney. And I also want to say a special welcome to the channel members. I see you guys joining in. So say welcome again. So if you want to see the first 30 minutes of this conversation, it's going to be open to everybody. If you want to be part of the Q&A with Whitney and you need to become a member. Okay. So Whitney, let's get right into it. Okay. So this is just I'm going to give a general overview for anybody who's not familiar with PetToThreat. We're going to be talking about PetToThreat. So let me just talk about what it is very briefly. Okay. So PetToThreat was created by 3 Black women researchers. Okay. Dr. Juanita Johnson-Bailey, Dr. Keisha Thomas, Dr. Rosemary Phelps. PetToThreat deals with when a Black woman comes into the workplace, either they hire her or they promote her or whatever, because they see her for her outstanding abilities. And she is just showing up and showing out. She's just showing up, like doing her thing. And they love it. Oh my God, we love Whitney. She's so brilliant, right? Then Whitney, me, starts outshining people in the workplace. And there's a shift in terms of how she's seen and treated as a threat, okay? Then they try to push you out. So Whitney, can you share from your own experiences as a labor and employment attorney, how have you seen the PetToThreat dynamic?
Sure, absolutely. So I see this coming up often, particularly when there's the intersection of I'm dealing with a client who is being discriminated against, who is a Black woman, who has a disability, and then maybe there's some other issue, over 40, right? So 3 different protected characteristics. And if they are over 40, more often than not, they've been in the same position for 15, 20, or maybe even what I call the sweet spot, which is 11 to 13 years, which means you've been there for a long time, but not long enough typically to like retire or be looking towards retirement. But you've been there for a long time and it's hard to transition and pivot out of that sort of sweet spot time frame. And what my partner and I noticed is that when Black women in particular, specifically, reach that point into their careers, people tend to know them really well. They've shared a lot about their personal lives. They may have shared a lot of information about their disabling conditions. And initially they're getting empathy, and then it becomes weaponized against them. Another phenomenon that we see a lot is that Black women in particular will get a lot of praise. You're wonderful, you're wonderful, you're wonderful. Take this on because you're just really good at this, and you're really the really competent person on our team. And Black women are often volunteering for a lot of things, and they get overloaded. And then when they start to say, look, I'm being assigned too much, or I can't handle all of this, then it's, well, you're not wanting to work. You're not do the work.
Gaslighting. Okay.
Absolutely. And another thing we're seeing too is for older Black women, again, a lot of the disability discrimination, also FMLA retaliation, because spouses are dying, children are dying, various different deaths in the family and things like that. And they're being retaliated against for taking FMLA, the care for a family member who is ill, or a child that's ill, or for themselves because they've become ill or needed surgery. So there's various different sort of hot points we've noticed that as you get past that 11, 12, 13 years of experience, between there and 30 years, there's going to be a lot of discrimination and retaliation for complaining about the conditions of the workplace, because at that point, someone's more likely to be comfortable complaining.
Wow. Okay. That was a lot. So one, I really appreciate you calling out the sweet spot. I think a lot of us have been in the sweet spot, and there's this perception. This speaks to like the intersection between mindset issues and legal issues, right? So that's why I really appreciate this conversation, because you're in the mindset of, oh, I'm comfortable here, I'm appreciated here. You're telling your personal business, which could be weaponized against you. And a large segment of my population who watch this channel have been working at a job between 11 and 13 years. So this helps me understand, again, why it's so difficult for us, because I've never wanted to just dismiss, girl, just up and leave.
Sure.
It's not easy. It's not easy. But what you're saying is there's all these things that we're being weaponized against in the workplace. Can you speak a little bit about FMLA retaliation?
Sure, absolutely. So typically we see that occur in situations where, someone's needed surgery. That's a very common issue. And then they need to take off work. And then I think there begins to be, you see employers really getting upset anytime people are taking off work. But I've noticed particularly with employees of color and Black women, because they've already at that point loaded much of the work onto you, right? And shifted a lot of the responsibility onto you because you're always raising your hand and want to help and want to advance. And that's great. But then they begin to use that against you. Also, I think there's a lot of confusion around how FMLA works. And not every employer has a huge HR department. Or even if they do, not every employer has a competent HR department. And there's a lot of paperwork involved with FMLA. Same thing with, you may concurrently be doing that with a reasonable accommodation request. Anytime you're filling out forms, know that they can be used as an exhibit in a lawsuit, and be careful about what's in those documents, because words matter and words can very easily be weaponized. If I can give a quick example.
Please.
In the trial I just finished, this employee was fired for alleged medical inability to do her job. And this all stemmed from a reasonable accommodation request that she submitted. That reasonable accommodation request included a medical note from her doctor that she would be best served through a reassignment with remote work. The word remote was used. She was asking for part-time telework. The employer took this medical note that used the word remote, and per the employer's policies, remote means 100% telework. And they said, no, you don't need partial telework. Your doctor's saying you need 100% telework because the word remote is here, and you can't do your job because it's not 100% remote. And she ended up terminated. So, much of the trial was spent determining what is the word remote. What does the word remote mean? And what did this doctor mean? So to the extent that you can have someone with a legal eye to look at this and say, look, am I making myself, is my doctor making me look so disabled, I'm talking myself out of a job, which employers love that. And what should I do about that? How should I get this adjusted so I can get the help I need without talking myself out of a job?
Yeah. So what would you advise to Black women? Well, first of all, can you distinguish FMLA and short-term disability? And then can you also give some advice to us as Black women? What do we do when we want to go for FMLA short-term disability so that information is not used against us?
Sure, absolutely. So FMLA is a protected leave entitlement, statutory protected leave entitlement, which means that you can, if you have a serious health condition or a family member has a serious health condition, and it kind of also depends on employer policies that might give you some expanded rights under FMLA, but it's protected job leave. Also, depending on at least in the federal sector, the employer also has to pay for your health, their portion of your health insurance premiums. So that's very important piece. It's not just the leave, but it's unpaid. The exception of there are some laws about pregnancy where that's paid. And it's 12 weeks. It can be used all at once or it could be used intermittently. So for example, I need FMLA to attend doctor's appointments and different things like that. But so I don't need it, 5 days a week, but I need it intermittently. And I see people get that messed up too with the intermittent leave because they don't follow the procedures and then they get disciplined because they're not requesting the FMLA correctly. So short-term disability is a type of insurance, disability insurance, that typically pays out a percentage of what your salary is. And a lot of employers will make you take short-term disability and FMLA concurrently. But it just depends. And so the important piece is to not just know your legal rights, but to be very familiar with your employer's handbook. Do not just rely on what the HR person is telling you the policies are. You got to read them for yourselves. And also, if they're telling you something, ask to see the policy. Ultimately, if you fail to follow policy, you can't blame Susan in HR. It's going to be you who is going to be responsible.
Right. So be informed no matter what they tell you. So no, based upon what you said too, you said sometimes we can share personal information, particularly when you're in that sweet spot, because you're familiar with working with these people. So you might be sharing information about your personal life and medical issues, all these different things. So what would you advise to Black women in the workplace about sharing any personal information about ourselves? Because now we know this could be weaponized against us.
Sure, absolutely. And I see it all the time. I've seen people who have a manager they worked with for 20 years. And my client thought that them and this manager were like family. They've known them 20 years. And then that same manager will go and toe the company line and get on the stand and say, Whitney was absolutely horrible. She was unprofessional. She was rude. She was difficult to work with. And then also she told me that, she didn't think that management was doing certain things correctly. And I told her that, no, this is actually the policy. And she kept doing it that way anyways. Or things like she confided in me because she was unhappy with her performance evaluation. And I felt like the way that she was approaching that was rude and unprofessional and pushy. So I've definitely had that happen where
you talk about betrayal.
And it's difficult as an attorney to prepare. It's difficult to prepare people for that because I know that people think these people are their friends. These jobs make it like, oh, we're a family. Do not ever underestimate someone's willingness to protect their own job, their own financial future, and get up there on a stand in court or wherever and say very bad things about you.
Yeah, I think there's a misconception that many of us have as Black people. I think many times we are very kind to people and we share things because we have an expectation or, we're kind-hearted people in general. So we're expecting that of other people. But there's a difference between, it's not like your spouse, right? It's not can't testify against you. these people are not your spouse. They really are looking out for their own, welfare, even if they're your so-called good friends, right?
Sure.
So, Whitney, can you share in terms of your representation of other Black women? What are other ways you've seen PetToThreat show up in the workplace? Like some signs that Black women watching this might be able to relate to.
Sure, absolutely. My mentor used to, and I think it's a quote from Maya Angelou, but the quote, when people show you who they are, believe them.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So once you start seeing that, believe it, and do not allow people to gaslight you. I see a lot. I think that in these jobs, first of all, there's lots of jobs out here, and I think we can become too attached to these jobs, and we feel like I've worked hard for this, which we have to, and that therefore we're entitled to something back. These jobs don't owe you,
and that they're loyal to us, and so they'll look out for us because we work so hard and we're so dedicated. Right. And they give us more work responsibility. So then we start thinking that we are not expendable, like they can't just get rid of us.
Yes, and that's exactly it. And then there's the betrayal. There's going to be a betrayal. If you are a Black woman in the workplace, there is going to be a moment of betrayal. And at that point, I think that is where you have to make a decision. Do I stay here or do I pivot? Because once that betrayal happens, and it will happen, things do not get better. So I think that we have to trust what we're seeing and we have to act appropriately. I think we have to go into these jobs prepared to leave. Whenever we got to leave. I always made the joke because people come in my office and say, you don't have anything in your office. And I said, yeah, I don't really like to decorate. You see what I did there? I didn't tell them the truth.
Right.
When I worked for someone, I didn't have anything in my office just in case somebody felt like Whitney needed to go. All I had to do was grab my bag and go.
That is not your home.
Right. Yes. And also, there's nothing in my office, so people don't know any more of my business than what I want them to know.
Good points. Good tips. So for Black women who are considering doing FMLA or short-term disability, you advise, look at the employee handbook. Don't just go by what HR is telling you. If they're telling you something, have them back it up in writing about what policy they're referring to. Any other tips for Black women who are interested in exploring FMLA and short-term disability for us to protect ourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would pay attention to the culture in the workplace. Is there a general culture that is antagonistic to people taking leave? If there is, document that. If there are expressed comments, negative comments made to you about you taking leave, document that. Dang, you're always on leave, or you're always leaving at this time. Where are you going? Different things like that. If you're getting comments like that, or if you're losing out on opportunities, all of a sudden you're not being allowed to do different trainings. You're not allowed to do things you used to be able to do and that you can still do, even though you're taking, for example, intermittent FMLA. Document all of that, because if it does come to a situation where there's either interference, which means they're not allowing you to take FMLA, or there's retaliation, you have that documentation so you can get a consultation with an attorney. Yeah. My very last point on this, HR is not your friend. Going and complaining, HR works for the company, going and complaining to HR. I know this because I used to work with HR. The first thing they're going to do is call legal and the CEO, and they're all going to have a meeting and they're going to talk about how best to mitigate any legal issues that you may be raising. So if you're thinking about reaching out to HR to complain, I would at that point see if I could find an attorney to advise me on how best to handle that. And the same thing with any kind of EEO complaint lines and things like that. You need to be very careful because that's all evidence.
Oh, excellent point. So if you want to interface with HR, like there's a serious employment related issue, do you advise that Black women go consult with an attorney and then see if an employment attorney, and see if that attorney can come to any meeting or meetings with HR?
Sure, absolutely. So I've had situations actually with a Black woman client who's disabled or had a disability. and was teleworking as an accommodation. They were trying to take it away, and then HR wanted to meet with her. And she engaged with us. We sent an email, and then all of a sudden they didn't want to have the meeting, and she kept her telework. So
Wow.
it
So
worked
come with backup, basically, legal backup.
right. Yeah, absolutely. When they may say, oh, we're not required to have, representation there, to let you have legal representation there, that's fine. We can still advise someone to say as little as possible, answer any questions you're being asked truthfully. Again, say as little as possible, document everything that's said, and resist the temptation that I think we as Black women, we want to help. We want to help. A lot of times when we're asked a question, we don't stop and say, I'm not going to answer this right now. Let me get back to you with an answer.
Really good point. Really good point. So, for Black women watching right now during this general time, can you share about our legal rights in these work environments so we can be more informed?
Sure. I mean, there are a plethora of labor and employment legal rights in the workplace. We're seeing on the sort of national stage those rights being chipped at or being challenged in a lot of ways that are really scary, but they're still here. The main one everyone knows about, Title VII, protects you from discrimination based on your race and color and gender. Everybody knows ADA protects you from discrimination based on disability. The Rehab Act is the federal standard that applies for federal employees. It's the same as ADA. FMLA, that we just talked about. There may be OSHA standards that apply to you both at the federal and state level. There may be local ordinances where you live that are more expansive than the federal civil rights law. I know right now that protections based on gender, sexual orientation, those are being challenged at the federal level, but you might have those protections at the state or local level. So it's important to also know if you might have some kind of expanded rights as well.
Okay, so you advise like the first sign something is going wrong at this job, like in your gut, you're like, this does not seem right. Or maybe they're treating me differently than they treat Susie or whatever, right? Like something's not right. Is that and documentation so important. So in addition to documentation, is that when you advise that Black women need to consult with an attorney? Like the first sign?
Absolutely. I think, if the first sign of trouble, it's a good idea to talk with an attorney and say, look, this is going on. Do you see some legal issues here? Or even if it's not a legal issue just yet, what is the best way for me to move forward so that I can protect myself? A big piece of that, the woman I told you about earlier with the telework, who HR wanted to meet with her, I am certain they were going to take away her telework and try to force her to come in, and she couldn't. And so they were trying to fire her.
Wow.
So don't wait. And she engaged with us the first sign of trouble. Hey, these people want to meet with me. I think they want to take away my telework. And so we nipped that in the bud. Instead of her going through this, saying a bunch of wrong stuff to HR, then she gets fired, and then she's calling us. So anytime you can avoid getting, too far along in a bad situation, it's best to try to talk with an attorney who can help you navigate it.
Okay. So 2 follow-up questions. When HR taps you and they want to meet with you, go in prepared, consult with somebody else. And I think what trips Black women up too, it's not only that we're so loyal and that we're really hard workers and people exploit our labor. The other thing is that in our minds, we start trying to make logical sense out of it, right? Like, well, like, I don't know for your client if she felt it's like, well, I'm a great employee. They want to meet with me. They want to try to figure out what's going on. It's no way that they would try to get rid of me because I'm a great loyal employee. Have you seen that with your clients? Like this trying to make logical sense out of it, and they can't believe that the job is really trying to get rid of them?
Absolutely. It's, work life. A lot of people spend more time at work than they do with their own families. Once you incorporate the commute and, working after hours, and we're constantly plugged in. And so people believe that if you just work hard at your job, then you will get that loyalty and that love back. And that is not the case for at least Black women in my experience. The interesting piece is I've had clients who are still in that disbelief even after they've been fired.
What?
So I'll give you an example. I recently had a client who thought that they wanted to meet with her to give her a promotion. She had wonderful performance evaluations, thought she was up for a promotion, and they called her in to fire her.
What?
And, no real explanation why. And she'd given a lot to this position.
Wow.
And so you see now the people who were doing the DEI work, doing great work, them being summarily dismissed.
Wow.
And they're not even being given, here's 30 days pay or anything, just like bye.
Right.
Just subject to the whims of what's going on in the current discourse. So people have to believe that these jobs, they're a business. If you die, that saying, if you die today, they'll post your job tomorrow. I think that is very, very true. And you have to operate in the workspace with that understanding that if I die tomorrow, they will post my job and replace me. So you got to take care of yourself, take care of your health, protect your rights, stand up for what's right. When something's wrong, speak up, but do so in a manner that, you're going to protect your financial future.
Yeah. So, and also know your legal rights and also seek legal recourse or consult an attorney if you feel like things are off. And I can imagine for your client and for any Black woman who's in that situation, sometimes we see the writing on the wall, but sometimes we don't see the writing on the wall because we don't know what they're planning behind us. And like you're walking, you're being bamboozled. You're thinking you're coming in for a promotion and boom, no, that's not going to happen. So I see a question in the comment. What if they say you are not allowed to bring in an attorney? What would you say? What would you advise for Black women if they're given that, if they're told that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that happens all the time. But you should flex that and say, I'm going to bring an attorney, because when you do that, they know then at least you have access, right? Because only 3% of lawyers in this country are Black. Most of us don't personally know an attorney, whereas our white counterparts, for example, they have judges and lawyers in their families. So once it becomes clear that you're a Black person with access to legal counsel, the strategy tends to change, because HR is going to go back. They're going to engage with their legal counsel, who's going to say, okay, they have a lawyer involved. We needed to be a little bit more careful. And at that point, you may either see the meeting get canceled because now all of a sudden it wasn't that important, or the nature of the meeting might be different, right? Maybe they were going to try to demote you or something like that. And then it just turns into like a sort of performance related meeting. Again, if it's a meeting you don't know what it's about, and HR is not meeting with you for fun.
Right.
And so if it's a situation like that, go in, don't ask any questions unless it's like something very germane, like benign. Take copious notes, be honest, and recognize that anything you say in that meeting, it's like talking to the cops. Anything you say can be used against you.
Good point.
Yeah, I mean, I would treat it like that. These people are not your friends. They've already got a meeting set up with legal after they finish meeting with you. So just be aware of that.
Wow.
Definitely.
Right. So put them on notice that you have consulted with an attorney. Even if they say you can't bring an attorney, they've been put on notice. So that might shift the tone or whatever their game plan is. And just like they're going to meet with their attorneys after, you meet with your attorney after too.
Absolutely.
Right? About advice. Okay. So as we're winding down the general public part of our talk today, can you share about how, because you said only 3% of attorneys are Black, and not necessarily that we need to be with a Black attorney, but a lot of us don't even know what attorney to go to. We might not go to an attorney for, I don't know, estates or something like that, but we need a labor and employment attorney. So can you advise how Black women can find a good attorney? And the other part, because I know we're almost at time, the other part is, how do we find attorneys and it not break the bank? Like, what should we be looking for?
Sure, absolutely. So I think that an important piece is when you find an attorney, first of all, when you look at their website and there's 20 different things, they're a jack of all trades, a master of none. I would steer away from that for a labor and employment issue, because it's a pretty specialized area of law. Not that they aren't all specialized, but this in particular has a lot of moving pieces to it. So I would definitely recommend that you look for someone who, labor and employment laws is their bread and butter. That's what they do. If not the only thing they do, it should be the main thing that they do. With regard to, and this has been something that's very disturbing to me that I've seen in the legal community, that's been a trend. With regard to fees, make sure you understand the fee structure. I've had potential clients come to me and tell me that, because when you call an attorney and you say, okay, well, I've been working at, corporate AT&T for 15 years and I make $200,000 a year. They know you have, salary, assets. You're telling them all this stuff. I own my home and I'm worried about paying my mortgage and all these things. So they're hearing in their mind, okay, this person has a means to pay. And I have heard stories of attorneys telling people to take out loans against their homes, take out loans against their retirement accounts, borrow huge sums. And I'm talking about $50,000 retainers.
Wow.
Like that. So unfortunately, there can be a little bit of exploitation in the legal field, because it's not really, there's not a lot of information out there about how much does it cost to hire a lawyer. Everybody kind of does it differently. But if you hear someone telling you it's going to be a $50,000 retainer, and they're suggesting things to you like take out a loan against your house, or borrow money from family, or take out some kind of loan, or use credit cards or things like that, you need to be very, very careful. Very careful.
Right. Are labor and employment attorneys, are some of them contingency only?
Some of them, and it depends on the type of claim, right? Because not all employment law cases, it doesn't always make sense to do a contingency. For example, if we are representing someone who is having issues at work, but they're not quite ready to file a claim, like the woman I told you about, who they wanted to have the meeting with HR about her telework. There's no damages in that, and us emailing, and she kept her telework. So work on our end. I think she paid us $500 for that.
Yeah, it depends.
Through that, and so it just depends. But again, I think that if someone's telling you to take out loans and things like that, I would steer far away from that. We've heard lots of stories of people retaining attorneys, giving them large sums of money, and that individual just getting, ghosted, unfortunately.
Oh, terrible. Okay. So Whitney, I just want to say thank you for this general admission. I would say general admission talk about knowing our legal rights. So important for us as Black women to know. So ladies, we're going to close down the general portion. We're going to shut this down. If you are a member of the channel, you will have access. We're going to be on for a Q&A for an hour with Whitney. Okay. So if you're a member, see the other in your membership area, we're going to be going live. Okay. So go over there so you can be a part of the Q&A. If you're not a member, you can become a member immediately. Literally, there's no wait time. So you can become a member, click the join button, or in the description section, you'll see the link. Okay. So everyone, thank you so much for watching. We're going over to the Q&A section. Give this video a thumbs up so that other Black women are aware of it. I know this is not my regular time, so please share this video with other Black women who may have missed the video, because I usually go on in the evening. So again, everyone, I will see you later. Any resources that I mentioned, I'll have all of Whitney's information description section. Any resources to help you will also be in the description section of this video. Okay, so I will see you all later. Again, if you're a member, I'll see you in a minute or so. Okay, take care, everybody. Whitney, I'll see you over in the other link, okay?
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.